Next now to Iran, where protesters took to the streets for the 11th night in a row. The NGO Iran Human Rights says more than 75 people have been killed since the demonstrations began. Those protests were sparked by the death of a young Kurdish woman after her arrest by the country's notorious morality police. But along with calls to end the compulsory hijab, demonstrators are now also calling for a complete overhaul of the regime. Well, to talk a bit more about these latest developments, let's bring in France 24's Reza Saya in Tehran. Reza, since these protests began, it has been difficult to really get an accurate picture of just how intense these protests are. What's the latest you've been hearing there where you are?
Yeah, this Tuesday is a religious holiday here in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So at this hour, things are very calm, very peaceful. Very few cars in the streets, very few pedestrians in the streets. And it's important to point out that religious holiday or not, over the past 10 days, during the daytime hours, things have been quiet. It's when the night comes, it's when the sun goes down that you have these anti-government demonstrations. And when the sun came up today, the big question was, did anti-government protesters come out last night, and are they going to come out tonight? Answering those questions with confidence and certainty is very difficult, and that has everything to do with the difficult circumstances journalists are facing here, severe restrictions. The government has severely curtailed internet service. They've blocked a number of messenger apps, social media platforms, and obviously we can't get to every neighborhood in Tehran, let alone all regions in Iran. So we've mostly relied on are secondhand reports, secondhand accounts from people who say they've seen protests and videos posted online. And based on our observations over the past 24 hours, and we say this with caution, there seems to have been a drop in videos posted online and accounts of anti-government protests that seem to suggest that these anti-government protests are not as intense as what we've seen in the past. If indeed that means they're dying down, that's going to be welcome news to authorities here in Iran and bad news for a lot of Iranians who've risked their lives to go out and fight and protest for more freedoms.
Reza, might it also mean that the authorities are indeed holding their line against these protests?
It could be. Obviously, we've seen a signal of a more severe crackdown, more than 1,200 people arrested, more than 70 people killed, according to rights groups. That could be a factor. And then another factor could be that these protesters, as courageous as they are, they don't have a clear leadership. They don't have a clear strategy. And how long can you sustain these protests without a strategy and the leadership? So if indeed these protests are abating, are dying down, the question for these protesters is, how do they keep their fight going for more social freedoms, for more political freedoms and rights? And then you have to look at the government. How much longer can they fail to address the simple grievances and demands of people and keep this country stable at a very difficult time?
Reza, thank you for that, and thank you for your reporting. Reza Saya there in Tehran. Stay safe.